My name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluent. So I've talked to thousands of customers over the years. I've seen a lot of different use cases, and my goal here today is actually the following. One, I want to help you understand the basics of Party Matrix, and then two, I want to demonstrate how project managers can best benefit from Party Matrix, and then providing you a framework to get the most out of Party Matrix, and then finally helping you envision what your work and life success might look like with Party Matrix. So challenges that project managers constantly face. If as you're listening to this, you're thinking about the project that you manage, and you're thinking about the problems that you're constantly struggling to deal with. And there's five that seems to, pop up over and over again. The first is scope creep. And what that means is that what happens is when we start with a project, sometimes it's very well defined, but then afterwards there's changes. There's changes in priorities, but there's also new things that are added constantly, right? It's never actually the same. And so as project managers, we actually struggle a lot in terms of juggling all of those new tasks, because where do they fit in? Do they override the previous task, or do we get to them as in, are they nice to have, or are they must have? And then the second challenge is communication issues between stakeholders. Projects that are complex tend to have people from so many different departments within your organization, and then in some cases you actually have stakeholders outside your organization as well. And the more stakeholders that you have, the larger the challenge. And so being able to solve that issues is just a very, very important thing for project managers to be able to do. And then the other thing is a lack of clarity on what's important and the progress of those tasks, because we might have a lot of things that we're working on, but what's really important too is understanding how far along are they progressing, and whether or not we're actually moving the needle towards a bigger project. And then balancing the priorities and workload, especially if there's a lot of people involved. You want to make sure that actually, you're not overwhelming certain individuals who might have too much on their plate. And then, of course, if everything is a priority, then nothing is, right? So therefore, you have to go and decide what are the things we can actually execute, and what are the things that we will have to put off, and what are things we might never get to. And then finally, the ability to review work in progress. If a project is, on the order of a few weeks, that's not a big issue. But if projects last for years, you might want to go back and review all the decisions that have been made, who were responsible, who executed on what. And so understanding that history is actually really important as well. So Party Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct efficient meeting, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. So how does Party Matrix help project managers with these challenges that we talked about? First, Party Matrix uses the 4-quadrant method to really clearly delineate priorities. And so even if you have changes in priorities, it's very easy to communicate that. And so everyone who's in Party Matrix can actually see exactly what the priorities are for any project at any moment in time. And that is the same reason why it helps with communication issues between stakeholders. So it provides what's called an asynchronous view of priorities. And what I mean by that is, right now, if you want to understand the priorities of all your projects, what do you have to do? Do you have to have meetings? Meetings is synchronous. That means you have to get everyone together to talk about it and decide, what is it that's important, what is it that's not important. Asynchronous is the opposite, which is you can go in and check on priorities at your convenience. And that's the power of Party Matrix. So because Party Matrix has this very clear visualization of priorities, anyone at any point in time who's involved in the project can go to Party Matrix and actually see the priorities that's there for that project. And then not only that, when there are changes, that's really important, you're able to get alerts on those changes. So you don't have to go and have meetings over and over again. You can actually start getting rid of them because you can actually access all that information at your convenience. And to tackle the issues of clarity, Party Matrix provide a single source of truth. And when we said single source of truth, what it really means is that if you want to know what your coworkers, your colleagues, your managers are also thinking with respect to priorities, right now, if you don't have a system in place like Matrix, it is very, very difficult to get inside their head, right? And so Matrix has one central place. And so you know that if you go to Matrix, you go to that project, everything that's really important is there. And then we're able to create workload reports and various views, such as the agenda views or the one-on-one views, to show gaps in workload. And what that means is that you can see, again, who's overwhelmed, who has some capabilities left, and then even allowing you to communicate to your colleagues and so forth, how your day and your weeks are looking. So then, if someone assigns you something, you know that something else got to give. And then finally, Matrix provide a really comprehensive history to track all the changes and within the context of the task and within the context of the project. So there's a couple of ideas I want to share with you on how to leverage Matrix as a project manager in particular. So you can use Matrix for many different reasons, but there's at least a couple of things that our system sort of suggests that you could potentially use it for. One, you can use it to prioritize tasks. And so what that means, of course, is just to have a place to track everything that you have to do, be able to go and understand what's important, what's urgent, or you can use it as a way to better allocate your time. So then you can maximize productivity, which means identifying the low effort, high impact task. You can track project progress. You can collaborate more effectively because you're actually communicating your priorities to your teammates. Identifying project risk. And project risk is actually really interesting. That's, why do projects fall behind schedule? They fall behind schedule because you're missing deadlines. You're falling behind schedule because you actually have changing priorities, the scope, the changes in scope, again, as we talked about. And then the other thing too is that, if you have a lot of things that's happening in 1 week and you don't have the resources available for that week, or you already have too many things booked for that week, then how could you possibly tackle those challenges? And so project risk is just a way of identifying missed priorities and miscommunication. And then achieve work-life balance. Work-life balance is really just, again, ensuring that you are human and therefore you can't do everything. So, if you have 100 things to do and you have the resources to do 25 things, then we really have to make sure that we communicate to everyone else. These are the time that I have available. This is how much effort I have available. Anything beyond this is just not humanly possible. So what makes Matrix different? It's the only project email and meeting management software that is Microsoft 365 security certified and across the web app, Teams app, and Outlook app. We're leveraging AI to help teams and individuals achieve their goals. And today you get a sneak peek of a new capability that we have. And then we actually also provide what I call people-centric collaboration. So we talk about project management, but at the same time, we're talking about the things that you have to do for others. And so how do you identify all your tasks that you have to do for your manager or your colleagues across all your projects, right? Because project management is not a siloed event. You might have multiple projects that's going on at any point in time. And then Matrix is available as a SaaS, a HIPAA compliant, an Azure government cloud version, as well as private Azure deployments. If any of those things interest you, please ping us, hi@affluence.com or support@affluence. So with that, I'm going to go really quickly into the fundamentals behind Matrix. There's a famous quote attributed to President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And so what that really means is that when we take our tasks that we have to do, it is so powerful, we're able to separate them into the dimensions of importance and urgency. So if you took everything that you have to do, instead of actually just having them in one long list, imagine now you take that all those action items and you start distributing them into the various dimensions. What are the things within a project that are important? What are the things and what are their deadlines actually? In fact, so if you look at that from that perspective, the tasks that you have that are actually due soon and important are the things you should do now. And then the tasks that are important but actually due next that you have to plan for. And then at the same time, identifying action items that you can actually delegate to somebody else, making sure that, it's part of the, they're not part of the blocking, the things that are blocking progress. And then finally, inbox is where we talk about all those shifting priorities and all those new changes and the scope changes and so forth. Where do they belong initially? They belong in the inbox. And then from the inbox, you can take those and decide where they fit within the bigger picture. So one thing that I want you to take away from this presentation is that the Eisenhower matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. As a project manager, your goal is to achieve project success. There's no question around that. So to achieve project success, sometimes you have to decide what are the things you have to work on and what are the things you have to drop. And so when you use Protomatrix, you can help identify those mismatched priorities within the organization or within the team that's working on this. And so success from Protomatrix is about identifying all those mismatches, right? And so when you have disagreements on the priorities of projects, of critical projects, that's when you're using Protomatrix correctly. And then at the same time, if you're starting to find more and more alignment as you use Protomatrix, then now you know that everyone is agreeing, everyone is aligned, and that you're doing the right things. So one thing to keep in mind is that one of the recommendation I have as you use Protomatrix is leverage it as a communication tool. And what I mean by communication tool is use it to tell everybody else what's on your mind. And that's because a lot of times we don't communicate that until we sit down in a meeting, right? Until we sit down and we're spending hours talking about everything. And guess what? The vast majority of that time is not that useful because you probably agree most of it anyways. And where you should always spend your time instead is on the disagreement. So therefore, my recommendation is to use Protomatrix, if you're using it for project management in particular, to make sure that you write down all of those key tasks, write down all those priorities, and then put them in the appropriate quadrants, invite the appropriate people, and then when you have meetings, just project Protomatrix on the big screen and talk through that. Then you can quickly identify where you should focus your effort best. So with that, I'm going to jump to Protomatrix itself. So then you can actually see the presentation of the product and how we can use it for project management and so forth. I do want to mention, as I said earlier, the webinar is recorded, and then afterwards we'll post it on affluence.com/webinar, so you can always go there to review it or if you need to share it. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the product. So here I'm showing Protomatrix web app. And so if you go to affluence.com and you sign in with your account, this is sort of the view that you see. And as you can see, the way Protomatrix is structured is the following. On the left-hand side here, you have your list of projects. Now, one thing that's really interesting is you might have much more than one project. You might have one really, really big project, and then you might have, or you might have 5 or 6 small projects. And projects actually can stand for a lot of different things. So for example, a project can be transient. And what I say by transient means that a project has a start date and an end date. And so it has a very clearly defined start and end. You might also have projects that are persistent. Persistent projects are actually one that may never ever go away. So an example of persistent project, at least at our company, are actually the features, capabilities for various products. So we wouldn't end the product, and so therefore we only adding more to that. And so that's a different kind of project. But you might also have projects that are for clients, right? So if you're a consulting firm, you might have a project for each client that you onboard with all the action items they have to do for them. And so you have one central place where everyone is aligned. So those are the concept of projects. And so you can add projects, and then from there within the project you have the matrix. And so with this matrix, you can see that it's actually structured very similar to what I showed in my presentation. You have the 4 quadrants. It's not a list. So this is the hardest part right here. When you add a task to Protomatrix, you have to decide where it goes. Does it go in quadrant 1, which is again the do now or the fires? Quadrant 2, the do later or plan for, the stuff that you can delegate, and then sort of everything else. So when you make that initial list, maybe it goes into the inbox, but from there, you have to take them out. You have to take them out of the inbox and you have to start prioritizing them. Because if you don't do that, then there is no clarity. And so that sort of defeat the purpose. You could have written down on a piece of paper, right? But Protomatrix forces you to do that from the very beginning. So as you can see here, within this particular project, I have what's called the project details. So the project details has the project name. So if this, again, is a customer that you're working with, then you might have that customer as the project name. Or if you're a construction project, you can have that. Or if you were a real estate firm and you're managing different properties, this could be a property name. And so the name here is actually very helpful because it should convey what it is that you're prioritizing. And then down there within it, you have what's called user groups. User groups essentially is a way of saying who's involved within this project. And so if you have projects that are actually shared between different groups of people, then you can go to the user group section here, and then you can actually associate user groups to this particular project. Let me give you an example. Let's say if you have a project that's a construction project, and within that construction project, you always have several key people if that project is in a certain geography, right? So you might have team members that's in the Southeast or something like that. And every time you have a project down there, there are several stakeholders that's always involved. What you can do within the user group view is create that team. And then from there, whenever you launch a new project for the Southeast, you just choose that user group. Then whenever you have a new team member, you can actually just add them to the user group and voila, they get to see all the projects that are relevant to them. At the same time, if someone is no longer involved in any of those projects, you can remove them from the user group and now they no longer have access. So user group is a very powerful way to manage permissions across multiple projects at the same time. You also have the ability to more granularly manage who's in the project. So what you can do instead is you can control at each project level who's involved. So for example, right now, this project is only me, but I can click on this plus and I can invite another team member. And so what I've just done is I've shared this priority list with other team members who might also want to see the status on each of these projects. So if you're using Protomatrix for project management and you have multiple stakeholders, for example, you might have customer service involved. You might have various support team. You might have engineering. You might have logistics. You might have finance. So you can go and invite each of those people as relevant. And now they can all go in and see the priorities across that project. So definitely use this because what you want at the end of the day is everyone to be aligned. So that's the goal. And then as you can scroll down a little bit more, you have different colors and you have different quadrant names. One of the things I like to do is I like to customize the quadrant name. And this is my recommendation for you as well. As you're working on different type of projects, use different quadrant names to signify to you and to your team members what is important about it. So what I mean by that is the following. You can see how here I have do now and fires, right? So that might be a terminology that your organization agrees to. But as you scroll down, maybe delegate could be renamed to resources. And the reason you might have resources is because you might be working on a construction project where there's a lot of documentation or there's a lot of permitting that you need to do. And so therefore you want to change it to resources as a way to track all the different forms and so forth that you have. So keep that in the back of your mind. The other things about colors, and it's actually colors is really fascinating because as you can see here on my left-hand side, I actually have different projects with different color coding. The way to use color coding is to have same type of projects be color coded in the same way. So then it's very visual for you to see all the projects related to operations, all the projects related to certain customers, etc. So definitely click on here, change the color, and the formatting is again, just another way of visualizing everything that you have to deal with. So that itself is the project details. And so you can go to project details at any point in time by clicking on this edit project view here in each of the project that you have, and you can go and modify it as needed. So now we have a project. Let's add a task. So for example, let's just say in this particular project, I have to go and prepare task 1. And so that's the task 1 that I have. And the way it works in Protomatrix is when you create a task, you can actually use natural language to update this as well. So what I mean by that is the following. Instead of just setting it, creating a task, I can go and say, prepare task 1 due in 1 week. And so what happens is Protomatrix uses what's called natural language. And it looks at the text here, due in 1 week, and we actually set the due date for you. So you can see how this actually saves you time because you're actually just creating the due date directly from the start when you're creating that task. And then the second thing you want to do is that the second thing that you want to do within the item itself, as I open it, is that you have to decide what other metadata that you might want to add to it. So now that I've selected a task, you can see on the right-hand side that project details is replaced with item details. Item details shows me what project this task belongs in, whether or not that this is the task name. What I can also do is I can star a task. When I star a task, you can see that, there's a little star icon that shows here. The starring is a way to mark that something is very important. And then the other thing you can do is actually also add icons. So we actually have a list of icons here. In project management, one of the things that our customers like is actually using the red, yellow, and green circle here. And so if you want to easily show that a task is on schedule or that's at risk, right? At risk would be yellow, on schedule would be green, and then is behind schedule would be red. So you can actually do that. So for example, let's just say this task is on schedule, so I do that. So now it's very visual for me to see that, okay, everything in here is green, and then I'm good. In the item details, you can scroll down a little bit more. You can see the owner. Every task has one owner. That's key. That's a very, very important point around Party Matrix. You cannot have multiple owners. You have one person who's responsible. And the reason you do that is because you want to know who to go to at any point in time. If it changes, change the owner. But you can add followers. And so if I click on here, what I can do is I can invite a follower. And so the way follower works is the following. If you're a follower in a task and that task gets updated, you will get a notification. So what that means is if you're a project manager, you assign a task to engineering and you say, could you look into this XYZ problem? You set a due date in 1 week. Now, if that task changes or there's a status update, you might want to get notified. In the old days, right now, just think about how you're doing it. You go and you create a task, and instead of actually, let's say you weren't using Party Matrix, what you do is you send engineering an email and say, could you do this XYZ, by next week? And then from there, crickets, right? Because you don't know if those tasks actually got done. You don't know if there's problems blocking it. You don't know if there's any changes from their perspective. And not only that, you don't even know if they received it unless they actually respond to you by email. The difference with Party Matrix is the following. When I create this task and I assign to someone in engineering, what happens is that that person is now responsible for that task, and they'll get an alert inside Party Matrix that says, hey, you were assigned a certain task. Secondly, because you set a due date, it'll actually notify them when the date comes to when the due date approaches. And so they'll get that secondary notification. Thirdly, what happens is when that other person sees the Party Matrix task, you actually get notified as well. So when I assign a task to somebody, what happens is if they see it, their avatar will show up indicating that that person has seen the task. So it provides you a feedback in terms of making sure that critical tasks within a project are actually addressed. And because if someone hasn't seen it, it's very unlikely that they're going to get to it, right? So if you don't have that visibility today in terms of, if you're sending out an email to somebody within the organization and you have no idea if they're working on it, you have no idea what progress there is, and it just crickets until the due date and it's something that's really critical, that's not going to work. Party Matrix gives you all that visibility in one central place. And the great thing about it is that that person can also respond directly here inside the chat. And so what that does is it actually provides a record of all the changes within this particular task. And that's the record within the context of that task within the project. What's useful about this is that it's in one central place. Again, if you'd sent this email to a coworker asking them to do something, and let's say they do respond. Let's say they say, okay, I'm on it, right? So that's fantastic, you know that. But here's the thing, which is when you start bringing in other people within this project, they wouldn't be able to see that because that email went only to you. So with Party Matrix provide this secondary layer of visibility for everyone that's involved in this project, because what it allows you to do is you can actually go to all the other tasks inside Party Matrix and see the status on each of them. And you don't even have to receive an email about it. And so you're able to actually eliminate so many emails that's being sent back and forth. You're eliminating, CC, BCCs, massive threads of all these other emails. And instead you go to Party Matrix, you look at the quadrants, and you know exactly what the priorities are at any point in time. That's how you should think about Party Matrix. That's how you should think about the power of Party Matrix. So with that, I have the chat section. And again, the chat section provides all that information. The other thing I can do, as I mentioned to you, is let's just say I have a due date already. I can set what's called reminders. Reminders is extremely useful in project management for the sole reason that we typically have far too much to do, and we start dropping them if we don't get reminded. So you see here, I have a task 1 that's due in 1 week, but let's just say if I wait for that week to, to come on August 24th, I might not get it done. So what I can do instead is I can say, remind me daily. Now, guess what? I'm going to get a reminder in Matrix that I should look at this task on a daily basis. I do this all the time. When I have a key task, I will set a due date that's in the future when it's actually due, and then I set myself reminders. And Matrix always reminds me, brings that back up to my attention so that I know, okay, I actually got to get to this. And it's so powerful. Very, very different use cases, reminders and due dates. As you can see, when I type remind me daily, the text turned green. That means our system, again, used natural language to actually process it. The couple of things you can do with reminders that's actually pretty helpful, which is you can also say remind everybody daily, right? And so what this does is not only does it actually add a reminder for you, it also remind everybody who's a follower here. So again, if you have a task that's really, really important and you have multiple stakeholders that's involved, you want everyone to understand that, hey, we have to tackle this and I want everyone to see it. That's the kind of thing you want to do with Matrix. It is a powerful capability and you're not sending emails, you're not having meetings. Instead, you just do it in here and it'll show up in the Matrix. And as long as everyone using Matrix is checking, their Matrix and just looking at notification, then you have that full visibility. It is extremely helpful on critical projects and it's extremely helpful to making sure that you actually get the right things done. Then over to the notes section, there's a couple of things here that's useful from a project management standpoint. As you know, you can add notes. And so notes essentially includes, information about the task. Again, this matrix is not necessary, it's not designed to replace like a Word document, right? So there's no rich text or whatever in here. It's intended just to have some notes around the task. But the other thing that's useful though is actually subtasks. So if you click on that subtask option, you can add subtask here, subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3. And so when you have a project, within the project you might have tasks, and then the tasks you have smaller tasks, and then each of these are actually tracked within the matrix. So for example, now that I added those 3 subtasks, when I go back to the chat section, matrix will update me and say that these subtasks are created. And then the second thing that's really helpful is that as I mark those subtasks as done, my progress will automatically update. So if I have 5 subtasks and I mark 2 things as done, then matrix progress will change to 40%. And then resources. Resources is really, really helpful, again, from a project management standpoint, to create that single source of truth. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Matrix create one central place for you to track everything. So in order for you to do that, you might have to bring in documents or links or resources that actually bring it all together. So then anyone who looks at the Matrix project will know exactly the status of the project. And that's the goal. You're using Matrix correctly when you have a project and then you bring in a totally new team member. Imagine, you've been working on a project for the past 2 years, right? You bring on a new team member, they open Matrix, they look at Matrix, and they just see everything. And when I say everything, it means they understand the priorities, they understand the things that we'll work on next. And then if they need to drill down, they click on each action item and they can see the history of it. Imagine how much time and effort that saves you. Because how often do you have to do onboarding? Let's just say, you have a whole new employee and then, what happens is it'll take them 6 months to get onboarded to fully understand everything. Instead, with Matrix, it takes them a day because they can go in, look at a project and completely understand the context and the decisions and the priorities. And that's how powerful it is. So it'll save your organization time and effort. And not only that, if anyone ever have questions around, hey, why did we make this choice? Or what are we going to work on next? Matrix provide that answer in the chat section because it provides that full history, and then in the quadrants because it provides a complete visibility of priorities. So one of the things I mentioned is in resources is the ability to link to documents, to link to your websites, various websites like SharePoint, etc. But the other thing Matrix allows you to do is actually link to tasks. So for example, I've just created here a task 1 due in 1 week. One of the things I can do is actually I can create a linked task. Okay, so what I can do is I go ahead and click on add item here. I'm going to add prepare Okay, I'm going to call task 2, and I'm going to say due in 2 weeks. So now I'm creating a new task. But what happens is I want to link these tasks together. So as you know, in project management, you might have dependencies. You got to do 1 before you can do 2. Very obvious. If it's in construction, you have to go and get the permits before you can start the preparation. And then you have to get the foundation before you build the walls, right? So those tasks are dependent on each other. And if the permits are late, guess what? Everything else is late too. So you want that in a visual form as well. So Matrix allow you to do all of this at this as well. So here I have 2 tasks. One of the things I can do is link these tasks together. So for example, if I go to link existing item, you see how actually task 1 pops up here as a choice for me to link them together. And then there's 5 different ways in which I can link tasks. I can say they're related. So what does related means? Related means, let's just say if you have 3 things you have to do for a particular client, and these tasks are not in any order, so therefore they're related. So you can say the task A is related to task B, related to task C, right? They don't have to occur in series. They can occur simultaneously in parallel. So that's what related means. So it's just, again, it's a way of linking tasks together, but letting everyone else know that, hey, this is also on the table. But the other thing you can do is you can actually say that a task is blocked by. So for example, task 2, I could say, is blocked by, so this item here blocks that item there, right? Or I can say the item above blocks the item below. So this item blocks. And then I can also say caused by and causes. So if you're using Matrix, play with it and you can see how it actually works. Now, blocks and causes are actually the same in terms of functionality, because if something blocks task 1, blocks task 2, it's the same as task 1 causes task 2. But the difference is communication, because you want to go and clarify to everybody that, hey, this task got to be done before this task, versus this, if this task happened, then this other task will cascade. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and say task 2, right? This task right here, task 1 blocks task 2. So I choose that option and I link it. So now I've just linked that together, and you can see that in the resource section, that information is here, but I can go and I can link additional items as well, and I can add other documents as well. Every task in Matrix has a URL. Every project in Matrix has a URL. And so that allows you to create these very, very intricate linking. And not only that, you can link across projects too. So you're able to go and say, this particular task is related to this another task in a totally different project. And so for everyone who's involved, they can actually navigate this complex web of action items. Because again, think about emails. If you send an email and you say, hey, to a colleague and say, could you do this? Then you send another email to another colleague, could you do that? And what happens is these individuals might not know how it all ties together in one central place. But with Matrix, when you create these tasks and you're assigning them to all those various people, and then you're linking them together with the related link, then guess what? Person A can go and say, oh, I see how this is all tied together. And now suddenly you have all the right people in one central place. Very, very powerful, very, very useful. We use this capability all the time because we'll have a task that come in from a customer, but it's related to another customer's request. And then from there, it's related to something else, a capability that we're working on. And if we don't link them together, you're creating duplicate work, right? And you're not sharing that visibility. So definitely use this. I love that feature, and I love the ability for me to see all that. Now, you see how this is the quadrant view, and you can see I have 2 tasks here. Let's say I want to go ahead and reprioritize. Very easy for me to reprioritize. Everything is drag and drop. As I mentioned to you earlier, tasks might start in the inbox, but you should always put them into the appropriate quadrants. In fact, actually task 2, I'll do the do later, plan for. And so when my teammate looks at this, they know exactly this is the start task, this is the do now, and then this is the one that's due next. With Matrix, you can actually take all these action items and look at it from a different view. So right here is where how you change view. So here I have the matrix view. I can switch to the timeline view. I'm sorry, the list view. The list view takes all these different tasks, but shows in one long list. This right here shows what quadrant it belongs in. You see the visual here for, this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 1. And if I have a very, very long list, a lot of tasks within a project, this view is pretty useful as a way to sort. And I can actually add item directly from here too. I don't have to go back to the matrix view to add new tasks. The list view is very useful for identifying tasks that are overdue. As you can see here, both of these tasks are due in the future, so they're black here. But if tasks are overdue, then they turn red. And so what happens is that when you go to this view, you can actually sort by due dates and find tasks that are overdue. And again, helping you identify the progress of things and helping you identify what are the things that are going to fall behind schedule. And if I go to the calendar view, it also does the exact same thing. It takes the information that you have, any task that has a due date, and actually show them in a visual form. Now, if tasks do not have due dates, then obviously this wouldn't show. But what I can do is I can take a task and actually I can drag and drop directly from here in order to change my due date. And actually I can click on each of these tasks and get the item details. Again, I can add a task directly from this view. It is useful if you're looking at the next week or two and you want to see how many tasks do I have in a certain week, right? This is a lot more visual. As you can see, when I look at the matrix view, I wouldn't be able to see that, hey, I have 2 things due next week. And so again, if I'm managing a project, I want to know where are all my work sort of clustered around. Is it clustered around, front loaded? So essentially it's all in the beginning, or is it all later? And so from a calendar view, you can see that. But it's all part of visualizing all these tasks that you have to do. Without the matrix view, you wouldn't know priorities. And so it's important to understand that part. But not only that, from this view here, you can see again who's responsible, right? So for example, this is my avatar K here. And then again, the icon is visual here. So if you have a task on here and you're using the icon, and let's just say, this one, I'm gonna change this icon to yellow here. You can see that it's actually very easy for me to, again, to see what are the tasks that are overdue, what are the tasks that are at risk. And then we have the Gantt chart. So the Gantt chart is built automatically for you once you start linking these tasks together. So if you have tasks with due date, they'll show up in the Gantt chart. But because I set dependencies, you see how in the Gantt chart here, it actually shows me the dependencies between these tasks. So task A has to be done before task B, or task 1 has to be done before task 2. And so that's how it shows a dependency. Now, what's really neat is, again, if you have a lot of different tasks in Protomatrix and you're creating them with the due dates, and then you're linking them together and says tasks, these tasks are blocking each other, etc. Protomatrix will build that Gantt chart for you automatically. And that's very, very helpful from a project management standpoint to understand the status of things. Again, if you understand what blocks what, then you know where to focus your time and effort. And then not only that, you can take Protomatrix directly here and you can actually modify the due date from this view as well. And so as you can see, Protomatrix allows you to have so many different views on the same data. And then from there, you can decide which of these views is appropriate based on whatever it is that you're working on, right? This information might be very helpful to export to external parties, allowing them to see the status of things. And then, you can take a screenshot, put into your PowerPoint presentation, share it with the appropriate stakeholders. So that's the Gantt chart. And so as you can see, we have 4 different views on the same data. So every project gives you so many different visibility based on whatever it is, whatever criteria that you need. Some people work better at dates. Some people work better in the matrix view. Some people work better in the list view. Protomatrix doesn't go and limit that. Instead, people can work in the appropriate view that's best for them, but Protomatrix provides one central place to see all that information and all the record of all the changes. And you can see too that as I make these changes, Protomatrix actually tracks those edits as well. So you see here, initially, when I first set this item, it says due August 31st, but I moved it around and now it's September 5th. And so when a teammate looks at this, they know that you went and changed the time, the due date at this time on this day and change it from this value to this value. Just think how powerful that is. If you are managing a team and you're managing a project and people are changing due dates left and right, you want to know who did it and what they changed it to. So again, if you were just using a standard list, or if you were just sending emails and you're having meetings, all that information is lost. But Protomatrix, if you use Protomatrix instead, all that information is tracked for you. So it's such a powerful way to have complete visibility on everything that's important. So definitely set due dates, definitely link these tasks together. And so if you want your project to be successful, you have to have clarity on priorities. You have to have clarity on the due dates. That's what it boils down to. And Protomatrix handles everything else, right? We don't know what are the due dates that you should set. But if you do set them, we can go and track them for you. So that's how the Gantt chart works. That's how the calendar works. That's how the list view works. That's how the matrix view works. And those are the details around the items itself. Now, as you can see within the resources, I can do so many more things. I can attach, I can upload files, I can link to SharePoint, and so forth. Now, there's one thing I want to share with you about with respect to project for our project manager in particular, is the ability to communicate the project to external stakeholders. So if you go to the project details here and you open the project details again, on the top right here, you actually can open this ellipsis, and there's a couple things you can do. One, as I mentioned, every project in Protomatrix and every task in Protomatrix has a link. So what that allows you to do is, let's just say I copy link to this project, right? And I jump to a different project. I'm actually able to do this. I can create a task, and instead of just creating a task, I can actually paste that link that I just created, and I add that. And what I've just done is actually I create a task that's actually linked to a project. So when you're doing project management, you might have a project of projects, for lack of better words, or you might have a task within a project that itself becomes another project. And so when you think about from that perspective, Protomatrix allows you to paste any link to any item or any project and paste them as tasks, and our system automatically track that. So you see how here I pasted that link. I didn't paste project management initiative, right? I pasted the link to the project, and Protomatrix automatically link it for me. And it shows me this icon that allows me to jump to that project. And so when you use Protomatrix, you might have many different projects. You might have all these tasks that are interlinking with each other. We solve all of that problems for you with our linking system. Extremely powerful, extremely useful. The other thing I can do is actually I can click on this and jump back to this project, again, as a way to organize. So now I'm going to go up here and I'm going to show you a couple more things. Every project in Protomatrix has a calendar. So what that allows you to do is, if you want to share, again, let me give you an example. Let's just say you have a project for a client, and that client's external to your organization, and you have a lot of tasks that you do for them. And you have all these different priorities, and you have all these different due dates and so forth. And you want to share with them the status of all of these tasks that you have. So instead of having a meeting, you can instead give them a calendar link, and they can add it to their calendar. They can subscribe to the calendar, and now they can see the status on each of those projects. And so every single one of your clients can have that visibility. The other thing you can do is you can even share the project in read-only mode. Now, as I mentioned earlier, from a permission standpoint, anyone who's in this project can edit the project. But when you share an external party, you may not want them to edit it, right? Instead, you only want the internal people to edit it. But what you can do is you can share the project in read-only mode. And so when they open it on the web, they can actually see, again, the task, the status of things, but they can't edit it. And so that's very useful if you have external stakeholders who needs a read-only view of Protomatrix. One of the things you can do with Protomatrix as well is the ability to export all this information as CSV. I know that, from a record retention standpoint, this is always very important, which is, working on a project for many months and so forth, and you want to go and export the task. And so Protomatrix allows you to export that as a CSV. But then it allows you to do the opposite too, which is an import from CSV. So what you can do is you can export a task as CSV, or export a project as CSV, make changes, and then re-import them as CSV, and it'll create a new project. And the reason you do that is you might want to create templates. With Protomatrix, we have a very powerful system called templates, and the way templates works is the following. Let's just say you have a project, and within that project, you have 30 tasks. And those 30 tasks are the same whenever you have another project. So example might be you have a construction project, but you're building things over and over again, and you have a series of tasks that might be related to permitting. Okay, so then you create a Permatrix project called permitting, and you add all the tasks related to permits. And you have a task 1 that's due today, task 2 that's due in 1 week, task 3 that's due in 3 months. And so you have all these action items that's due at various times. When you save Permatrix as a template, what it's doing is actually take all the tasks, build a template for you. So then when you have a new project, you just choose that template and all those due dates get created for you, and they automatically propagate forward based on your start date. So what that means is you only have to create these tasks once. And if you have repetitive projects, Permatrix is so powerful because it will save you so much time and effort. So I love the project template. And so if you, again, have repetitive processes, definitely check it out. Okay, so those, of course, as you can see, there's several more options here that I didn't explain. That's just part of something that you can explore as you use Permatrix more. But those are the capabilities that's pretty helpful as someone who's new, as a project manager, who's new to Permatrix. So at a high level, just sort of recap things I've talked about so far. One, Permatrix allows you to create different projects. From those projects, you have different quadrants. From those quadrants, you can create different tasks. And within those tasks, you have all these metadata. So if you were to use Permatrix today, definitely use those capabilities, because if you do, you've gotten 80% of the value out of Permatrix with 20% of the work, right? We have a lot of other advanced features, but they're only needed in various use cases. And so you don't need that to have success with Permatrix. Remember what I said, where success Permatrix comes from. It's coming from ensuring alignment with your key stakeholders, and then making sure that everyone is who's relevant is in each project so they can see the priorities. When you have your meetings, project Permatrix on the big screen, talk through Permatrix instead. And that becomes your agenda, because then you can go and really, really quickly decide we should focus on these key tasks, or we should ignore them, or we should reprioritize, etc. So do that. Make sure you set due dates. And then make sure that, if you think these icons are useful, use them. But if you set due dates, then Permatrix gives you that notification. And so let me show you how a notification works. So you see here, when I have Permatrix, on the left panel, I have a couple of things. One, I have this home view. When I click on this home view, I get an alert here. When I talked about how you can set due dates and you can invite team members and you can set reminders and so forth, it all shows up in the alerts. So here, for example, I have a task that's due in 1 week, but it's been assigned, it's been edited, and so now I get an alert. And from here, I can click on this and I can see that task. And once I do, then this alert goes away. So if you assign somebody a task, they'll get this alert and they can go to Permatrix, click on that alert and see the action item. They can respond to you directly from here. They can say, what's the status of this, etc. And now you have one central place for communication. And so when you also set reminders on a daily basis, it'll pop up here. So the second alert that I have was actually me setting a reminder in 10 minutes. And so you see how after 10 minutes, it actually sent me a reminder here. And now I know that, okay, I need to take a look at this to actually make that phone call or whatever it is. Again, alerts are different. Alerts come from reminders, come from due dates, come from delegation. And so always check your alert. And then when, sometimes you get a lot of alert and you want to clear them all, this is where the clear notification comes from. The one thing I haven't showed you yet is actually adding projects in Permatrix. And so adding projects is very, very straightforward. You go to this project list, and then you see how here I can click on show all projects. When I have show all project, it shows me all my projects. It shows me the star project at the top, right? Again, starring a project is a way to really ensure that you're focusing on them. And so that's why I always surface this to the top. It shows you the team members that's involved in this project. And then you can add a project from this view. When you add a project, you have several different choices. First, you can choose a blank project. A blank project means it's just a blank matrix, and you can choose various terminology. But the other thing that Permatrix allows you to do is also you can choose from the templates that you have. Or like I mentioned earlier, If you create a series of tasks in Matrix and it's a repetitive thing, you only have to create it once. Save it as a template. So now when you add a new project, choose from that template and suddenly all the tasks is in there. You just save yourself so much time and effort retyping all of those things. The other thing you can do too is actually you can choose from public templates. So the way public templates works is the following, which is, we built best practices over the years in terms of the various types of project that people use. And therefore, we've made some of these public templates available. You can use them just as a way to jumpstart your process. And so you can think now, oh, I'm a new manager, or I'm a manager and I want to plan my quarter. Maybe I can use this 30, 60, 90-day plan for managers instead. So instead of just a blank project, you can do one of those. And so the way Party Matrix works is when you think about Party Matrix, I'm going to go ahead and choose a blank project here. I'm going to say new blank project. Okay, so here I have the basic Party Matrix, but at the same time, I can actually do various other terminology because Party Matrix is so customizable. You can use it however it is that is appropriate to your project at this moment in time. So for example, let's just say I want to do a SWOT analysis instead. So this is a type of project where if you're in marketing or you're in market research and you want to do a strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, right? Analysis, you don't want to use the do now fire quadrant. You don't want to use the Eisenhower matrix. You want to use a different terminology. And so from here, I can do that. I can add project and voila, you can see how my quadrant names are different. And now you can do that SWOT analysis for whatever it is that you're working on. So you can see how I have a lot of different projects. They can be for various sources. But here's the exciting thing. I want to show you something that's new, that's unique to Party Matrix, and that's coming out soon. I'm going to switch to a future version of Party Matrix that you'll see hopefully within a few weeks. But instead of adding a regular project, I'm going to switch here. And I'm going to switch to a different Party Matrix application here. So now I still have Party Matrix, but when I add projects, I have a different choice. I have the option to create the project with AI. So what that allows me to do is I can go and instead of just creating a blank project, I can ask Party Matrix to help me build out my action items. So for example, we have a couple choices here, right? And so as you use Party Matrix more, we'll try our best to learn. And from there, we'll try to provide you information that might be useful. But what I can do is I can type in a goal. For example, I want to go and conduct a more, actually I have to say, streamline my supply chain, okay? So now I have a goal of streamlining my supply chain, and now I use the Party Matrix AI to build that project for me. So what's happening in the background is we're leveraging what's called generative AI to go and build out action items that's useful to you. And so it provides you a starting point for you to leverage your capabilities in order to maximize, your outcome, right? Because you or me, all of us, what happens is we don't know everything, but the resources that's available out there can cover pretty much everything that we can imagine. There's no problem that's sort of unique to us that no one else has ever seen. So what we're trying to do with Party Matrix is actually provide you insights and provide you a stepping stone for you to achieve those goals more quickly. One of the things I love about using this create with AI capability for are things like you have goals that you have. For example, maybe you want a promotion, or maybe you want to raise, or maybe you want to improve your communication skills. Those are goals that you have. What Party Matrix will do is when you type in those goals in Party Matrix, it'll build out the action items for you to achieve that goal. So anyways, definitely leverage this capability when it's available. It is extremely powerful because it allows you to learn so quickly and get ideas that you otherwise can't. So keep an eye out on that. The way that you get access to it automatically when you create a new project, this option will come up. And when you do use it, give us feedback. We're always trying to listen. We're trying to improve the capability there. Okay, now I go back to this view, you can see that when I go back to here, that project has been created. I can actually click on this. And one of the things that you'll notice is that when I go to this project here, it actually built a matrix for me with all the different things, all the different tasks I can do in order to streamline my supply chain. And as you can see, I didn't have to tell Party Matrix much. I just tell them my goal, and it's helpful for them to understand your industry, your job function, and then from there, we can build almost everything else out. And if you look at the notes section, it actually, Party Matrix says that this project is to streamline my supply chain process in order to optimize efficiency and reduce costs. And then it tells me all the different tasks based on the low effort and high impact, allowing me to focus on what are the things that will make the biggest impact at any point in time. So powerful, so useful, again, as a starting point for you to actually get things done and for you to become as efficient as possible. So with that, I'm going to jump back to Party Matrix here, my presentation. Okay. So what can you do today to improve your project management as a project manager? One, sign up for Party Matrix and use our app and team and Outlook if you haven't already. Create a Party Matrix project for each of your projects. Again, as I mentioned, you have so many different types of projects you can put in Party Matrix. You can have the persistent project. You can have the transient project, everything from construction project to project for managing each client, project for managing initiatives. So create a project for each of those things, each of those areas, responsibilities that you're responsible for. So the more projects that you create, the more helpful Party Matrix can be, because it's just a way to categorize all the things that's in your brain. And it's so powerful when you're able to take that out and you actually can think more clearly, because Party Matrix forces you to do that prioritization. It is so difficult to prioritize, but that's why it's valuable, because once you get it down, you can even have a discussion with yourself, right? Do I really think this is important? Do I really think this is urgent? And then make sure that you take that and you invite the appropriate team members, right? The team members could be your manager, the team members could be your colleague, the team member could be your client, the team member can be your family even, depending on the type of project that you have. And then make sure that you create items in Party Matrix with due dates in the appropriate quadrants, and make sure that you always go back to Party Matrix, look at the alert view, and don't drop them. So as a recap, remember Party Matrix helps project managers in so many different ways in tackling those challenges I mentioned. Uses the 4-quadrant method to clearly delineate priorities, right? As I showed you, it's so useful to know what's really where you should focus your time at any point in time. Again, with Party Matrix, team members can go into Party Matrix at any point in time and get an understanding of priorities. They don't have to meet with you. They don't have to have a meeting. You don't have to, sit down in a room together to know what the priorities are for each project. You don't have the resources for that. That's just a waste of time. But then as you use Party Matrix more, it creates that single source of truth. And so what that allows you to do is you have one central place with all the priorities, with all the notes, all the history. When you bring on new team members, they can see everything that's relevant. They can onboard themselves on a project so much more quickly. And then at the same time, when you have someone leave the project, all the changes they've made is still there. And so then you don't have to go and lose all those progress that you've made previously. And then I didn't show you, but Party Matrix create workload reports and agenda views. So allowing you to see what everyone's workload is at any point in time. And then finally, Party Matrix provide that full history of record of all the changes. And you're able to export those history on a per item basis, on a per project basis. So what success with Party Matrix would look like: you have one central place to store all your priorities. Everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. And then the repetitive procedures are templatized to save time on future work. And then I didn't show you, but Party Matrix has really deep integrations to Teams and Outlook. So check out some of the other webinars and you'll see how we do email prioritization and how we do Teams integrations. But Party Matrix allows you to actually bring in all these different sources of communication into one central place, into one central project. So then you have very, very clear visibility.